questions that you should send them and have them ask. Or, I'm sorry, that you should ask them and have them answer.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Hi, I'm Ginger McClush from St. Louis, Missouri, medical oncology hematology consultants, and you are listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast.
Thank you for that intro. I'm David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Cardin. Good morning, Donna Grindle.
Good morning, David Sims.
So you have enough energy to get through this one?
We're going to try. We're both just beat to death from our JOBs.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, you know, you got the whole coronavirus thing going on, and I don't think I paid this much attention to news outside of cybersecurity and compliance.
Well, technically it falls in that for me, so I say anyway.
Yeah,
but yeah.
It does. But, you know, it's the whole people asking me questions about, have I bought my toilet paper yet? And I'm like,
what is the deal?
I'm like, well, why do I need to buy a bunch of toilet paper?
I do not understand the toilet paper and bottled water thing. It's like, this is not in your tap water.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not
it's
buying
not
it.
known. It's not known for giving you like diarrhea. I still don't get it. You know,
Yeah.
I need to check some of where those psychologists are trying to figure out what the group. It's like, I need to have it because everybody else needs to have it. And did you see those videos of people getting in a fight?
I haven't seen that yet. Over toilet paper?
Yeah, one lady's got a little buggy full of toilet paper rolls, and the other lady's arguing with her, saying, "You need to give up some of those. Nobody needs that many."
Yeah. Well, there is that selfishness that you see people having, which is kind of ridiculous, which is why, you know, it's why I'm not buying toilet paper. I'm buying ammunition, because as long as I have that, I can have any toilet paper I want.
The world through David's eyes.
But no, I mean, I see how people treat other people during a actual real crisis. And if they don't have what they need, they'll come get yours.
I say you just stand on the street, or we have toilet paper, so we're going to start selling. Hey, psst, want some quilted northern? Psst,
I've told
come
people
over here.
I've told people before, if we ever have like a zombie apocalypse, I'm not worried about the zombies as much as I'm worried about the people the zombies don't kill.
You're like what is the movie where Woody Harrelson plays Tallahassee?
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Where
Yeah,
they end
he'll
up.
be that guy.
Yeah. But it's an interesting time. And as we're recording this, things are getting worse and worse. And, you know, we're starting to get test kits out there now, which I think the next week or two, we're going to see a drastic uptick in infections, and everything's day to day. I mean, in my business, it's day to day. We're trying to gauge, you know, should we be coming into the office? Should we be going on site to clients? You know, clients are freaking out a bit because we have clients in medical, obviously, but we have some that are outside of that. And we're trying to figure out how this is affecting their business, and do they need remote access so that their people can work from home? And a lot of these people are like, look, we can't do it. We can't function from home. Our business won't run remotely.
Yeah. I mean, and these are things that we talk about having these kinds of plans for a reason, that all businesses should have them and consider them. And I was even talking to a friend of mine who owns a salon. And I'm like, you need to be having this 2 weeks ago. I was like, you need to be having these conversations. And he's looking at me like I got 5 heads. He's like, a salon? He's like, what are you going to do if you have people who want to come in and cut hair, but they've been exposed, or they're coughing, or they're sick? Do you, and what about the elderly people you see, and how are you going to make sure that you're cleaning all of the, you have certain things from cleaning the hair, but what about who's cleaning the doorknob on the bathroom?
Yeah.
These are things that everybody needs to worry about when these things happen.
So we also had an incident. I'll call it that, even though I don't know how many people noticed it, but me. But we have a kind of a local news Facebook group, and the other day, probably 2 days ago or so, maybe 3 days ago, I saw somebody post that there is a confirmed case in our area, and I live in a small town, and so people that are actually in the news as their job were like, no, there are no confirmed cases in your town. And this person was like, oh no, there is a case here. There's a confirmed case here. Sure enough, like the next day it comes out in the news. It might have even been 2 days later, which tells me somebody in healthcare was talking.
I know, right? Today, as we're recording this, is the week everything changed with COVID-19. And it's also the day, ironically, that we released our episode on it, which makes us seem omnipotent.
We are. We always know.
Yes, we decide that we're going to talk about these things.
Yes, we do.
So it seems somewhat ironic because at the time we recorded it, if you had said, we're going to have to cancel hymns and close all these conferences and the NBA and the NHL, and I just saw today the Masters isn't going to be played and schools are closing. I mean, we would have never really envisioned that would be happening 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm like you. At that time in that episode, we were making sure that we reminded people that there were privacy and security concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So just like you, and I'm sure you had that moment that you knew when you saw that somebody somewhere was not following their HIPAA privacy requirements.
Oh, yeah. That was the first thing I thought of, which was funny in a way.
Yeah. That's what I went through. I had a meltdown over it because it was just like you and I have been talking about. We're tired. We're having to deal with what the impact is on our business, what the impact is on all of our clients' business, our family. Remember, we take care of my 91-year-old father-in-law. There's all these things you got to worry about. And with all of that on top of us, along with our normal trying to do our work, we're exhausted. So by the time late at night I saw the video from the guy in Rome, of course, yes, we're in Georgia because stuff happens in Georgia. But I mean, thankfully he seemed to have turned the corner, but this guy had it really bad. He's been in isolation in the hospital up there, just really, close life and death, close kind of sick. Was just starting to get over it this week. And they were interviewing him because he posted a video about, hey, I'm better, because he's trying to, release information to people that knew him. And so then they asked him, hey, can you interview us on something? I don't even remember where, but he did an interview. And so I'm watching his video and, he's sitting there in his hospital gown in the hospital room. And they say, how, feeling. And he starts talking. He's like, I'm in law enforcement, have been for years, retired. My son lives over in another community. I haven't seen him in, a long time. I haven't seen him in weeks. Certainly not since I've been sick or before I got sick, weeks before then. And he gets a call from his boss that said, we heard through the grapevine. Ergo. Where did you hear? We heard through the grapevine that your dad is in ICU with the coronavirus, so we don't want you to come in. It's not genetic, and you can't get it over the phone. And then to make it even worse, his son's in law enforcement too, so he's a first responder, that we're now telling you have to self-quarantine because your dad in another town has the coronavirus. And then he says that his grandson's school even closed because of this.
Yeah.
This is why you don't talk about it, because people aren't educated, people aren't prepared. You have to have it controlled properly.
And what do you do when, you have schools closing? All these kids are going to be home. Nurses have kids, doctors have kids. Who's not going to be able to come to work because now they have kids at home that have to be watched and cared for.
Yeah, and this goes back to that should be part of your plan when you're in healthcare.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before, even talking about natural disasters like the hurricane. When I came back from having been in Key West when they were getting ready for Irma, and I was like, I really firsthand experience how much time the individual needs to have to worry about their own stuff and their family. You've got to include that in your plans.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't yet. And it will be how we deal over the next few weeks will be the guide for what we need to do differently and what we did right in a crisis.
Yeah. Well, in our HIPAA boot camp, we tend to lean toward a ransomware attack as being our tabletop exercise because that's kind of the most likely thing that'll happen. So we want to, do that. So maybe next time we'll change it to an infectious disease response.
I know. Yeah. I mean, why not? Why not? And we do have a couple of different scenarios that we're like, here's some playbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And people, for years, I would say, a pandemic, a flu outbreak, something where people can't make it to work or you're overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody be going, nah, it's not likely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're not going to plan for it.
Exactly. They kick into the it won't happen to me syndrome.
Yep.
But the thing about it is if you have a plan like this, if something else happens, let's say the building burns down, then a big part of that plan can cover that scenario as well. So it's, it's great to be able to have that ability.
Yes. If you make a plan that can adapt, then you can be prepared for these and not be asking 1,000 questions in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And at least some people are asking the questions for the last couple of weeks. And, we've been involved in discussions for weeks now. But like you said, you've got people, you still can't get them.
I know.
But anyway, that brings us to the important announcement that we had to decide this week to join in until we have enough tests done where we can really understand what we're dealing with. We felt like it was the best thing to go ahead and postpone the March HIPAA boot camp.
Yep.
Which is 2 weeks from today, or it would be finished 2 weeks from today.
Yeah. Sorry, Alex. We're
Sorry,
really looking
Alex.
forward to your patio furniture.
We're going to make it up. We're going to celebrate his birthday in August. So we've rescheduled it for August 18th, 19th, and 20th. Still here in Tucker.
It's like the week after my birthday.
Yeah. Oh, really? It's right after Alex's party.
Yeah.
And we still have the plan for the Los Angeles session, September 15th, 16th, 17th in San Pedro, California, which is, it's like me saying, well, we're doing it in Tucker, Georgia, but everybody else would consider that Atlanta. San Pedro is the area of Los Angeles where we're doing this. And we have all kinds of information we put together for that. We're going to assume that we can get back to some semblance of normal business by that time. And so we'll have back-to-back boot camps, David.
I thought about that. I was like, wow, I need some recovery time after that.
I know. Is a month enough? So,
I just want to go ahead and make the public announcement that we will not be having any meetings of the Donna Grindle fan club of these. Stay home. That'll be a completely separate thing. So don't.
I know. I loved it that George was worried that there would be enough room in the space in Los Angeles for the Donna Grindle fan club.
There would not be. So we didn't get one of the huge venues. So maybe next time we'll have enough space for the Donna Grindle fan club members.
You're so.
But this is just a boot camp.
Yes. So, but we do have a real topic to talk about today, not just a vent about where we are with COVID-19. We're going to try to carry on business as usual, as long as you will hang with us. We're going to talk about HIC SCRiM.
Yeah, which is a way to prevent COVID-19.
Oh, geez. Don't even. This is the guy that is coming out of the same joint working group that created HIC. We now have HIC SCRiM, and it's going to tell us, it's providing best practice kind of guidance on how to manage your supply chain. And we'll get to that as our main topic shortly.
Absolutely. Right after a word from our sponsors.
2/3 of small businesses that experience a cybersecurity breach end up closing their doors within 6 months. Cybercriminals are targeting your practice and coming after your most sensitive data. Visit us online and schedule a time to talk about what you can do to protect yourself, your patients, and your practice. Our website is securityfirstit.com. That's securityfirstit.com.
Does your business work with medical practices? As a medical practice business associate, do you realize that if you have access to patient information, you have to follow the same HIPAA rules as your client? Call Carden today at 678-292-5001 so they can assess your privacy and security practices to help ensure you are protected and prepared. Visit cardenhq.com to learn more. All right, we're back. So let's talk about the HIC SCRimming.
It's a scrimmage. It's a scrum. Yeah. Scrum is the rugby thing, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, this is something I think that it should wake vendors up. You know, they need to be paying attention to this because it is published as guidance and it will become a standard just like many other things do. Mm-hmm. And it integrates in and it references the NIST cybersecurity framework, which we both have, been talking about for years being the next step in where, we think HIPAA will go.
Yeah.
And, we talk about the importance of vetting vendors in the boot camp. We do like a long session on just managing vendors. Mm-hmm. Just this one topic, we devote a session to it, plus some. It probably ends up being like a couple, but this document is specifically designed to help healthcare organizations evaluate the risk they face in their supply chain. Hence the name.
I had an interesting comment from one of my healthcare clients this week. Mm-hmm. They had ordered a computer and asked if it had come in yet. And I said, well, it's taking a little longer than normal because, supply chain.
Yeah.
I was like, computer parts, a lot of them come out of China. And so, shipping has been an issue. So her face kind of lit up and she said, what? And I was like, what part did you miss? And she's like, the computer's coming from China? I said, I didn't say the computer was coming from China. I said that a lot of computer components come out of China and it's affecting the supply chain. And so it's taking us a little longer to get stuff. And she goes, can we just quarantine that computer for a couple of weeks before you bring it in? And she was serious. Like, don't bring that computer here until it's set in your office for 2 weeks. I was like,
Thank
okay.
you. You're welcome. I'll protect you.
I was like, okay, I'll do it if that's what you want. Yeah. So we have a computer that is in quarantine in our office. It cannot go out.
Just don't open it up. Whatever you do,
don't touch it. Which our technicians already touched it, so we're messed up now.
Yeah,
I didn't tell her that much.
It's a big thing. This is just a very excellent, unfortunately, example of why supply chain matters, and so many people will say, if such and such happens, if I get hit with ransomware and I need to replace all my computers or there's a fire or whatever, I'll just call IT and they'll get them for me in no time. That can't happen when you look at these kinds of scenarios. And we always try to bring that up, that you can't just assume that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's your plan. You can't just assume that you can suddenly get even one computer is a problem right now.
Yeah, we've got, I don't know if you've heard it, but the Durham County in North Carolina got hit with ransomware. Mm-hmm. I just happened to be sitting next to somebody in North Carolina government earlier this week, And he was kind of giving me some ins and outs of behind the scenes what was happening. And he leaned over at one point and said, they got 2,000 PCs they have to replace because they got hit with ransomware. Now, I asked him, I said, are they replacing the PCs, the hard drives, or what? He's like, I don't know at this point. I don't know if they're going to try to just re-image them or if they're going to try to replace hard drives. But I'm thinking 2,000.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly it. How to even consider this, if you are a small business and you then suddenly need them due to fire or other things that could happen at any time, and you've got a nearby business that's going to take 2,000 of them that come into the Durham area, and the supply chain is impacted, by China and everything that's going on in a global crisis. So while you may be able to continue to function in this environment, otherwise, if you don't have the equipment and you can't get it, and the 2,000 computers that they do manage to get there, they're going to the government, not you, or whoever the ransomware attack, who wrote the big check for the 2,000. So, yes, supply chain is essential in this. We're talking now about having, that the entire country does not have enough ventilators for the demand they expect that we will have in the United States. Supply chain matters a lot. So, and we need to give them the official title of HIC SCRiM, since we're talking about supply chain so much. HIC SCRiM, let's talk about supply chain. Health Industry Cybersecurity Supply Chain Risk Management Guide. That's why we call it HIC SCRiM, because we ain't saying that.
Yeah, you got to, shorten everything anyway.
Well, yeah, and it kind of goes with hiccup, and it's the same general working group. It all falls under the, what is it? And I should know this because, now I'm doing that, but the Health Sector Coordinating Council Joint Cybersecurity Working Group. Yeah. So there's hiccup and HIC SCRiM. There's some other stuff that come out of it.
Donna's just the HIC part.
There you go. I'm one of those HIC chicks. But dear vendor, you need to get this. And, let's write a letter to all of them. First of all, David will say, we were right.
Yeah, try to tell you.
Yeah. It's just, you need to look at this because this guide, they say that it's important because they point out that it is, quote, primarily written for leadership in small to medium-sized organizations. How about that?
Oh, so I'm not too big to do HIC SCRiM?
No, I wonder. And in the forward from the co-chairs of the committee, they say the guide is intended to provide actionable guidance and practical tools to enable those organizations to manage the cybersecurity risks that they face through their dependencies within the healthcare system supply chain. The hope of the co-chairs is that by enabling these organizations to demand secure products and services from their suppliers, we will leverage market forces to raise the bar across the healthcare supply chain to benefit us all. How about that?
So how are we going to do that?
Well, what had happened was, well, the idea is, they took from the NIST CSF 1.1 version, which that's the one where in 2018 NIST gave it to me for my birthday.
Yeah.
Right. And because they knew I just really, really, really wanted the final. So they took the supply chain management that was added in that version and they said, let's look at those outcomes that are expected under that section and how can we create guidance to help people do those things? Yeah, solid foundation. So it addresses the what kind of things, like what policies, procedures, what kinds of things should your organization do for vendor management overall? What is the items that you should expect to see? Then they say, how are you going to do that? So they actually give you some how and how to keep it moving once you start. And then they include things like some templates and some tools and contract management stuff that is very helpful. So I thought it was a great document. We will use it to supplement what we already have because, as we know, we've already been doing this for a while. But I love the point they made. Ultimately, supply chain cybersecurity is a business risk, not a technology risk. That has to make you happy, David.
Of course it does.
That they're not saying that this falls on IT.
No, I mean, that's a big part of the conference I was at earlier in the week, cybersecurity conference. They preached that over and over and over, that this is a business issue. Cybersecurity is not a technical issue.
Right. And we could not agree more. And it's what we're trying to get everybody. When you're thinking about your business, you need to include those concerns, not the concerns about other things. You got to worry about cybersecurity, supply chain management. Can my supply chain impact my business, in negative ways? Yes. Let's look at a long list. But it's got the templates, it's got assessments, workflow diagrams. Their workflow diagram is really pretty and technical. I like mine better because it took like 4 or 5 things and slammed them into one, so it was easier to put on one single page and you can read it. But again, that includes the details that we explain are in ours. So it's good to see. So under the what is it that you would need to do?
Okay.
What? Everybody's like, I don't know. So the what and how, here's the list of things that it takes you through. First, you have to define the supplier risk areas. And I thought this was a pretty interesting piece because we've never broken that out. And, we've tried to explain it, but they did a really cool thing where they made a list of, here are the kinds of things that you have to worry about risk. Getting back to, it's not technical, it's business. So you got operational risk. How can it mess with me in getting my work done? Safety risk. It's not about compliance. It's about patient care. And you've got not only your patients to worry about, but your employees, your contractors, whoever else. Competitive risk. So, trade secrets, all that. Quality risk, sabotage, illicit reuse or resale of coming out of your supply chain. That's really bad. Reputational risk, compliance risk, and then a thing they called secondary risk, and it's the broader supply chain ecosystem. So it's looking at the big picture. We talk about it as looking at the community and the impact on the community. And then geopolitical risks. So it does break those things down. These are all the different things you should evaluate when you're looking at a risk. Is it going to mess with my day-to-day? Is it going to impact, my people or my super secret sauce or, it's a long list of those kind of things, and looking at it, not just, is it going to impact my cybersecurity? Most people would say no on a lot of that. You're so tired you can't participate, aren't you?
I am listening to your HIC SCRiM.
Yeah. Folks, he is just bone tired, I can tell you right now. We're both tired, but he's bone tired. Then you have what is your scope? And, we talked before about how important the term scope is. But the bottom line is, what they're saying is, who falls in your supply chain?
Right.
Is it, a supplier of equipment, a vendor, a service provider, a consultant, an external partner, a third party that gets it from a business? But, you've got a huge supply chain, and you need to make sure you're addressing everybody that's in your supply chain.
So this is kind of building up to a risk assessment sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
this is how we do this. You would do the exact same thing with PHI. You
Right.
following me?
So right now we're just kind of gathering data.
Yes. It's the what. What do I need? These are
Mhm.
the things I need. And then once I've done all of that, and it includes guidance and how you do some of this, you define the tiers when you're doing the scope, and we do that where we say, is this a high risk vendor? Meaning they could impact me more than other people, than other
Right.
vendors.
So like your practice management software vendor,
Mm-hmm.
or the people that pay you money vendor. You definitely want to make
Yeah.
sure revenue cycle management is
Yeah,
one of those
yeah.
that are looked at hard.
So once you know all of that, then you got to do, okay, what are going to be my policies and procedures?
Oh, I
Yeah.
knew he was going to bring that in. Now I got to write policies and procedures.
So we define a lot of things that we're going to need in our policies and procedures, and we're going to define how are we going to assess this. But so far, we're just collecting data and defining the bigger picture,
Right.
right? Life cycle and all that kind of stuff. How are we going to make these assessments and actually incorporate this into our business, because this is business risk management. Have we mentioned that it's business, not technical?
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah. But that is a key element under the guide, is making it part of business operations. There is an item, supplier risk management as part of business operations. That is what you should do. And that's, people are assigned to it. There's ways to manage it. All of that kind of stuff's built into your operations.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, the what. Okay.
All right.
And then we have the how.
Yeah, this is where people will start sweating.
Yeah. Well, now I got to write all that down. Now I've actually got to go do these things. So the how, I start with defining, actually saying what is the organization's risk management policy, and establish roles and responsibilities within the organization to do the work.
Okay.
We've talked about that before. We might call that, say, the vendor officer, like the privacy officer and the security officer, if it was at a large organization. But remember, this is geared towards if you are in charge of a small or medium organization, these are the things that they do in big organizations, or they should be doing in big organizations. And we're going to show you how to do it if you will just read the book and use the tools.
Mm-hmm.
So they then say, okay, you actually go about doing these things that we've identified. You do the process of finding all your vendors. Again, it's, like we often will say, look at accounts payable, look at your 1099s. They include things like, what VARs do you use? Where do you have your contracts? Look through your contracts, your business associate agreements, your IT inventory. Where did that come from? That is my supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then you're figuring out all of the other pieces and parts and identifying, like, how are we going to trigger these reviews? And you and I, every time that we show them, and there's one of my Southern drawl. I don't know why. To me, I say time just fine. But I heard myself say time in a Southern way just then. Sorry.
There's no Y in it.
It was like the time I was in the Midwest, and I was like, down where the time is. And they're like, what? And I'm like, where the time is. What are you talking about? In the corner where the time is. The time. Yes, the time. I digress. So anyway, we show them, here's our vendor risk management workflow. And it says, when we're negotiating with vendors is when we should start this.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Heard that
And
before.
everybody says, well, that's never going to happen.
Why not?
That's what we always say.
Yeah.
But needless to say, it's a big issue that, we don't want to look at it at that point. We want to cut the deal and then evaluate the vendor.
Yeah. And then find out that you wasted your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're going to buy the car and then see if it actually runs and it's somewhat safe after the fact.
We're going to marry the person and then see if they're a good fit for us.
Yeah, no. Not
I
even
did that
90
once.
Day
It doesn't work.
fiance.
It doesn't work very well.
I don't know. Those arranged marriages, they claim they are, but somebody else is still checking it out.
Yeah.
Anyways.
You can get a mail order bride, but, with all the shipping disruptions, it'll take a while to get here.
Oh, David.
Supply chain management.
And back to where we should be. Once one of us goes off the rails, everything goes off the rails. So then you prioritize, and I like the breakdown they gave us about, different ways that you could determine your priorities by looking at how much are you spending with them. If you're spending a lot with them, they are an important vendor. Do they have sensitive or confidential data? Hello, BAA. Do they create a patient risk? So all those medical devices, remember how that's in HICcup?
Mm-hmm.
If something goes wrong with them, will it impact our revenue? You just mentioned revenue cycle management. Will it impact my operations, the criticality, all of those things? Will it make me not compliant? Will it make me look like a goober and mess up my reputation? But at any rate, when you consider all those things, then you're able to look at it on your own and say, these are the ones I should really be worrying about the most. Not that I shouldn't worry about the others, but these are the ones I'm going to worry about the most.
Mm-hmm.
Then they talk about the assessment, just like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the best practices. So first they bring up relying on certifications. There's a variety of third-party certifications that you could use, and you could use that in place of an assessment questionnaire.
Like a HIPAA certification?
If they offer you that, you're right away, all the red flags popped up at the same time. But the thing is that you have to keep in mind, if they say that, we have SOC 2, we have ISO 27, 2007, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, you want to see the scope.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a whole episode on why SOC 2 does not equal HIPAA.
Right.
Because you can say in the scope.
Yeah, we're only going to do this one machine.
Yeah, it's kind of like having the entire business evaluated by just one room.
Yeah. We do that when we're doing like PCI compliance. We want to narrow that scope down as far as we can so that it's easier to comply with. But that's not, somebody comes up and says, well, we're PCI compliant. Well, that has nothing to do with HIPAA.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, not at all. But even with HIPAA, there's still ways to limit the scope somewhat, but you got to know where the data is and all that to do it.
Yeah. And that, that alone is what many people don't understand when they look at these, and even the people that are claiming, well, and we did have that on, again, one of our assessments had somebody say, we don't have to worry about HIPAA because we're PCI compliant.
Or the one I hear most often is all of our data is in the cloud. So we don't have to do anything internally. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a whole segment on that.
My data is in the cloud. What does that mean? But again, it's that taking the time to understand the difference between my data is in the cloud and cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. Well, even if your data is in the cloud, how did it get there?
Yeah. Where is it at?
How did it originate? It didn't originate in the cloud. So
it's getting there somehow.
Yeah.
And then you have access to it along with potential other people because it's in the cloud. And while to you, you do not know where it is, somebody does.
Mhm.
You know, is that data in China? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, but I am, but I'm not. Anyway, the other option they give you is here is your own assessment. And they give you these templates. So you've got, example of a policy and procedure language. You've got flowcharts. And then they even give you doing the inventory of suppliers, a spreadsheet to help you find them and document their risk, or at least, set the tier and all that kind of stuff. And then a spreadsheet with the questions that you should send them and have them ask. Or, I'm sorry, that you should ask them and have them answer. You don't want them asking you because hopefully you know the answers for yours. So I really like at least the way that the document's put together. It tries not to be overly technical. It tries to be very straightforward in explaining the things that we know need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started looking at, what your questionnaires are. Well, first, let me finish what's in the document, because they say then you respond to your assessment. The output of the inventory prioritization assessment process should be reviewed initially and then periodically thereafter with senior leadership so that supplier risk can be understood and measured in context of the risk appetite and appropriate recommendations can be made.
Mm. Okay.
So, robust documentation should be maintained showing identified risks, decisions taken in response, and, where appropriate, requirements for supplier accountability for implementation of mitigations of identified risks.
Sounds like a documentation program.
It sounds like something we might have said.
Document.
That you should have robust documentation showing what you've identified, the decisions you've taken in response, and what kind of requirements or accountability are you going to put on the people that are supposed to be doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think this sounds familiar.
It's HIPAA-esque.
HIPAA-esque. It sounds like stuff that we preach and teach. In the case that the risk level falls outside the risk appetite of the organization.
I do like that. Risk appetite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not willing to eat all that. Here are the following steps that they recommend.
Okay.
Number 1, document the identified risk and business impacts for the organization. Because this part of my supply chain is outside my current risk appetite. Number 2, determine if additional controls or mitigations, which may include cybersecurity insurance, can be implemented by the supplier within a satisfactory time frame. And number 3, inform the executive sponsor of the recommendation. There you go. So it's a decision form, essentially. When they fill that out, you've got all you need now to go off and make your decisions about how you're going to handle this vendor.
Okay.
And then leadership gets to say, what are we going to do?
Right. It becomes a business decision.
It is indeed a business decision. Then they have a whole section that goes over the contracts. And I'm not going into those details. We have talked about contracts many, many times. But I do appreciate the fact that they include sample boilerplate
It's hard, I know.
boilerplate language for inclusion into the contracts.
So where it says your company here, I can just put my stuff in there?
Yeah, kind of. You can pick that up and put it into your contracts.
I can print it out and put it in my book and put it back on the shelf.
Yeah, kind of. But what they did in that section, and I thought this was quite interesting, and it's the first cross-pollination, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They took the HICcup standards and the top 5 threats and 10 cybersecurity best practices,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, put that in your contracts. so that you can see if the supplier you are working with is unable or unwilling to meet the requirements articulated in this template, and then it's in all bold. That may be an indicator of their scale and level of maturity, and consequently may be a cause for concern.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, that's why I tell people when you send them the questionnaire and they freak right on out, that's a red flag.
It's better for them to freak out than for you to have a relationship with them and then you'll be freaking out later.
Yeah, then you learn that they sold you down the river. So one of the things that they include in their, contract language is that you have to do the assessment and you're going to do these other things. Along those lines, it's we'll call it a furthermore, where do they say it? There may be relationship types outside of the list which are not effectively covered. In that case, you should seek independent guidance from a qualified cybersecurity subject matter expert when you're doing these assessments and you're trying to determine, what these answers really mean.
Mm-hmm.
You've got based on my relationship with them in their assessments, they have, here's your core things. And then we've got some supplemental things based on certain types of relationships that you have with these vendors. What kind of vendor is it? Then if they're this kind of vendor, you're going to ask additional questions. These are the questions you ask everybody. These are the ones you ask specific kinds. And if you have stuff that isn't in that list, that's where you get somebody to help you figure out. You don't just throw up your hands and don't ask. Good idea, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, a lot of it comes from Hiccup.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the guidance on how the buyer might obtain assurance that the terms of the contract are being fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we tell people to do all the time, especially around IT. They should be providing you assurances that they're doing the work that they said they're doing.
Thank you. Documentation.
Yep.
Eat your broccoli.
Little cheese here, little cheese there.
And it does include, that you can have risk transference or avoidance for things like cyber insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it keeps coming up, so we're going to have to get John on to interview again. But things, they keep changing where it comes to insurance. So, that's one of the topics everybody's having now is, as a business, if I have to close, does it cover the coronavirus for my business insurance to help me pay my expenses? So
that's a
there's
good question.
Yeah. But the fact that they say that, the Hiccup is the basis, so they've everything's cross-referencing itself. Hiccup saying that you should deal with your vendors. It's in there. NIST CSF said you should deal with your vendors. And again, none of this has to point to HIPAA. It cannot, so none of it does. Secretly doing HIPAA is what Hiccup and HIC SCRiM get you to do. But they have a point here that says, unfortunately, suppliers may have little incentive to provide transparency, especially to smaller customers with less leverage and purchasing power.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, even if such transparency were provided, small organizations have limited capacity and capability to digest and understand the information.
True.
That's why we're there, right? Therefore, small organizations, it is important to focus on the most important supplier relationships based on potential impact. In addition, consider the following. And I know this is what I think that some people may point to, but it's really not what they should be pointing to, but we're going to go through it.
All right.
Consider the following. Security is expensive. A supplier may be cutting cost of their security program to reduce overall IT expenses. Security is hard. All other things being equal, larger suppliers with more demanding, larger customers are more likely to have the scale, which enables them to secure their products and services, whereas smaller companies may find this more challenging. And I'd just like to point out, they do not consider these. They consider these things you should watch for, and it's not like if these are the case, then you can say, well, it's expensive, so we're going to write this off.
Right.
They're saying if you don't have the capacity and the capability to digest it, think about these things could be indicated in their documentation. Security is a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
Functionality may still meet the need 5 or 10 years from now. The security may no longer be adequate.
Yeah, that's how we break that down is when I say, yes, it can quote unquote work, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just Windows 7.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So just because functionally it's working doesn't mean it's able to be protected.
Yes. So consider the useful life of the product. Beware high-risk engagements with little in the way of long-term relationship or support.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get something now and it still works, but it's never really been secure enough, even when you started, it is not going to be secure enough later.
Yeah. We see this a lot with hardware, like routers and stuff where they buy the license for it because it has security license. And then, I go into a prospect's business and I'm like, oh, you got this router here. How long have you had it? 3-4 years. Okay. What about the licensing on it? I'm like, what?
Yeah, we got a 1 year.
Yeah. Well, the network's working. Oh, yeah, it's working. But you don't have any more security on it. Yeah, functionality is, typically is what the user and the client's looking for. I just need it to function. But that's not what security is about.
Exactly. And you know what else security is not about?
What is it not about?
Compliance. Compliance is not security. Security is not compliance. So that's the next thing they point out is that, yeah, there's a lot of regulations in the healthcare sector. The FDA really trying to look at medical devices and trying to get them to, well, what would you call it? Buckle down and worry about security in the development process, worry about security long-term, not just pushing out products. Just because they made a regulation does not necessarily mean good security.
So you mean to tell me if I am HIPAA compliant and I have a seal on my website that I might not be secure?
That is indeed the case.
Wow.
I know, right?
Shocking.
It says clearly a security program designed to only comply with regulations may be putting an organization at significant risk.
Right. Which another thing we often say, and I've heard it from a lot of other people too in the compliance and security space, which is all of these compliance regulations, all of them are the floor. Every single one of them is the floor. I've yet to hear anybody say, this is the gold standard maximum you can do. None of them. They're all like, look, this is the bare minimum. Yeah. And yet people are going, if we could just get to HIPAA compliance, we would be at the pinnacle of security and privacy.
Yeah. We'd be rocking it. No.
You're looking up at the floor right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So, but those are things you should consider if you're seeing red flags. That things that they say could be indicative of those issues. And then they have indicators of good practice.
Okay.
Good. Pat them on the head, give them a gold star, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's say you can't audit or test the security of everything. And this is what our approach has always been. I don't think you need to be perfect. I think that you need to have a program that you are aware of, that you're constantly working on, and that you understand the risks you're up against and you're doing something about it.
Right. So don't let perfect get in the way with productivity.
I know. Perfect is the enemy of done.
Yep. Progress. We want progress, not perfection.
Exactly. Here you go. Here are the things that you should be looking for as good practice.
Okay.
I would like to point out that you should also look internally to yourself for good practice. That you proactively test your controls and have them independently audited. That you demonstrate openness and transparency about your controls. You have some sort of industry standard certification, or that you are designed to comply with things like NIST CSF, FIPS 140-2. While these indicators have limitations, they state, they may point to a company culture that embraces the need for good security practices, which again is why I encourage every business to start focusing on things like NIST CSF.
Yeah, because you want something to point to rather than saying, well, our IT guy does that, or we follow Bob's best practices. I mean,
Bob's best practices.
I mean, that's often what you get when you start talking security. It's like, well, okay, because they'll use terminology like this. We're following industry best practices. Okay. What is that? I mean, it's not a framework. You're basically saying people on Facebook are talking about this in this IT group I'm in, so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, we had an episode, like one of the original ones that I remember, where somebody said, so-and-so knows everything about HIPAA and healthcare security, and we're following their best practices.
Mm-hmm.
I remember distinctly. Now I'm going to have to go find that episode. But it was like Bob's best practices.
I know. And that's, what's one thing we tell our clients is like, look, this is not David's idea of good cybersecurity hygiene. This is, these are frameworks that people a lot smarter than me, believe it or not, they're out there, put together. They test them against loads of other things and then say, here, this is what you should be doing and how you should be doing it.
But the bottom line here is we should be seeing these kinds of discussions in their answers.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're just throwing them around, you can tell really easily that at that point, all you have to do is say, can you give me your scope or some sort of documentation that shows that you're actually doing it and you're not just blowing smoke.
Yeah. I didn't see it listed, but I would also say that if your vendor gets dismissive or defensive, you should probably walk away.
Yeah, I would say so. But they also add if they have cyber insurance. And we've talked about that many times. Just because they have it doesn't mean you would be covered.
Yeah.
There's a pecking order there. But the point they make is having the cyber insurance matters.
Mm-hmm.
So all you vendors out there, you need to go look at what do you call it? The assessment questionnaire. All the vendors should evaluate the core section and see if they can answer yes to questions like, do you have a documented process that ensures privileged access is revoked immediately when no longer needed?
No, we send a ticket in 3 weeks later.
Are users trained to create complex passwords and change them periodically?
Yes, password 1234. I add an exclamation point every time it needs to be changed.
Are users trained and reminded regularly to not keep paper records of user IDs and passwords?
Yes. We make sure to put them under the keyboard.
Oh, there you go. Is multi-factor authentication required for remote access?
It depends on what you call multi-factor.
Is a solution present to prevent unauthorized devices from physically connecting to the internal network.
Yes. It's called Bob.
Bob's security practice.
He does not give anybody the access code unless we tell him to.
Let's see here. Are security patches regularly reviewed and applied to network devices? Not automated Windows stuff. Network devices.
Yeah, patching is... it's still a thing. Like, and it's a problem thing. It's not like, oh, do you patch? It's not a yes or no. It's like, how are you addressing the problems with patching? Really should be the question.
Well, but yeah, I mean, it starts, right? It's a start.
Mm-hmm.
Just by asking it and seeing what the answer is would be a good one.
Just don't accept yes as the answer. I want to peel that onion a little bit.
Peel that onion a little bit. And that's what we do with our questionnaire. We'll ask that and then we say, yeah, tell me a little bit more about how you do this.
Yeah.
They also include things like, are security patches and vendor recommended patches applied to workstations and servers as soon as feasible?
I did notice a proposal that one of our clients got last week. Somebody was trying to pick up their IT business, and it said, we do quarterly patching.
Wait, what?
That's what the proposal said, that they provide quarterly patching.
Okay. Then, okay. That then is a perfect segue to a question under vulnerability and patch management on the template that you are provided with HIC SCRiM. Do you scan your IT assets, meaning applications, servers, network devices, websites, etc., for vulnerabilities? If so, how frequently? The next question is, do you remediate identified vulnerabilities within 30 days? Yes, indeed. And it keeps going, and we're still in the core section. Do you have an ability to respond to security incidents? This could include internal resources or outsourced services.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But then they have that section that's called the supplemental questions by relationship. They add questions like, if this supplier is mission critical to your business with or without access, they say, do you have a documented process to trigger investigation and alert your customers in the event of a suspected data breach or a security event that may impact your customers?
Mm-hmm.
Then they say, here's a section that you should add if they have direct connectivity and or access.
I like the way they break that out, though.
Yeah. Do you have a documented process to trigger the investigation and alert your customers in the event? Same as the above. But they also add, do you have a process to identify employees and contractors who've been terminated and to inform customers to whose systems and data those individuals had access? We've been asking that one for years. And everybody's telling me, why are you asking this? We don't have time for that.
Yeah, and all this, I mean, it brings to the point of what it's pointing to, which is all of this involves active management.
Right.
And even if you have an IT vendor that's providing security and support, that doesn't mean that any of this stuff is getting done, because these are active things. If I had to actively scan for what's on your network, what software you have in place, what vulnerabilities are there, those things are not often getting done. Somewhat because they can be automated only to a degree. You still have to have somebody that's going to look at these things and put their eyes on them and decide whether or not it's something that your organization needs to address.
Indeed.
And it's not that it can't be done. It's often that a business says, well, I want to spend as little as I can on privacy and security and IT support. And so because of that, these vendors can't do what you think they're doing. You're not paying them enough for that. So, you get what you pay for. So Indeed. You should never choose a vendor like that based on price. It should be based on your needs.
and understanding that security is part of your need.
Yes. And it's active management security. It can't be set it and forget it security. It does not work anymore. It used to work. It does not work anymore.
And that's the thing that we have a hard time getting people to understand is it's not the same as it used to be, even 5 years ago.
Oh, I would say even less than that.
Yeah. But
I mean, it's
whether it's 2 years ago or what, everything changed definitely in 2016. It changed even more in 2018. And, who knows what's going to happen in 2020.
Yeah. And so, when we have people say, well, we just got this software 2 years ago. It's working fine. I'm like, 2 years ago, dude, what? You've not went back and looked at what you're doing and what your threats are now versus 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. It's not the same world. And when you're living in the, cybersecurity world, this stuff is changing daily.
Right. And unfortunately, what we see today, right now with this virus, that's the way cybersecurity changes.
Oh, yeah.
Every day.
We're looking at solutions for things now that I wouldn't even consider 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't even on my radar to even remotely consider it. And now I'm like, how can we do this? Because the clients need it.
Well, 2 years ago, I went and looked because I remember doing an episode, Ready for Extreme Vendor Vetting. Uh-huh. And I remember doing that episode. And at that time, we said, this is coming. We see it coming. That was April 2018.
Yep. We were right. We could have just cut this whole podcast down to 2 minutes.
There you go. Go back and look at that one. We were right. Read this document. We were right. Oh, but I think that we need to cut it off for now. We've rambled a good bit, but I think if you go look at this information, if you are a vendor, I urge you, if you have not been doing this, if you didn't listen to us in April 2018, listen to us now, go get this document and make sure your program meets these requirements. Get ahead of it.
Yeah, because it's not going anywhere.
This is going to be utilized in one way or another. There is, if you can say you meet these requirements, you're fine. Yeah. But if you're not even going to be in the conversation about these requirements, you could be in some trouble. Yeah. 2 years from now, we will be dealing with this as a regular practice.
Well, one thing we've seen this year that we've not seen any other year until 2020 is we are starting to see clients coming to us and handing us assessments that people are handing them because they're vendors. Mm-hmm. And so vendor vetting is happening. Vendor assessments are happening. And fortunately for them, they have somebody to hand this over to and say, I need help with this. Mm-hmm. They can answer some of the questions, but some of it they can't. They start getting into some of the technical aspects of what are you doing? They're like, I don't know what we're doing. and so we've had law firms that have gotten assessments from banks. We've had accounting firms that have assessments coming from the IRS and all kind of stuff in between. So we've not seen that before now, other than just the every so often PCI assessment that came in. But now we're starting to see vendor assessments happening.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
Yep.
We told you 2 years ago it was coming. We're giving you the tools to take care of it right now and get ahead of it, because a year from now, it'll be, what do you mean you don't do this? Mm-hmm. All righty then.
This is true.
I'm looking forward to us being a year from where we are right now. That's for sure.
Oh, I know. All right. That is our show for today, folks. So remember to share us out on your favorite social media site, and also make sure you wash your hands. Don't touch your face.
Washa.
Yeah. So it's amazing all this has to happen to get you to wash your hands.
Glad to see, what was it? Everybody's drinking water,
yep,
wiping, and washing their hands.
Yes. Well, not everybody's wiping. There's just not enough toilet paper to go around.
I can't wait to understand that.
I'm still wondering though, is it wiping or is it because we're gonna mark the people's houses that are infected by TP in their yard? I don't know which.
I think we're going to make toilet paper forts. That's what I think.
Yeah, it might be a thing.
As a kid.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could go bowling with them. That works too. I don't know.
In Key West, they throw them out of the plane and use them as bombs. That's a long story, but it's funny when you see a roll of toilet paper twizzling down from a plane.
Alrighty. Okay. That is definitely our show for today, folks. So remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.